Well, I actually say that because I am working on techniques to where my ultimate goal is to make age irrelevant. So I want people to be able to look at me and not be able to guess at all. So, there are specific techniques I use to do that, and they're very powerful techniques. But my goal is to basically not necessarily cheat death, because I think that death is a safety mechanism that is put into our genetics so we don't stay here forever. So we're basically meant to die, and we should welcome that because because that's just a natural part of life. So, but I think it's more than that. I think it's a safety mechanism from our higher self to make sure we don't get lost here. So I think death is a safety mechanism, not just an unfortunate drag at the end of life. I think it's a safety switch.
Yeah.
That's just,
Imagine if you couldn't die and then you got captured and then put into a torture chamber for like a millennia, and then like, I can't die, no. And then
now listen, now that you talk about that, but I have a lot of experience with deep psychedelics, and that is exactly what can happen to you. Except because a lot of people, because the question comes up, there's people who kill themselves in this life thinking they're going to escape something, but they don't. You can't escape this. You can't escape fucking consciousness. You can't undo yourself. You can't unthink yourself. So, and it can turn into a perpetual series of madness and never ends, because once you realize that. So kind of what happens is, coming into this reality is sort of like an anesthetic to the greater truth of omnipotence, basically, because we come here with specific and intentional limits on our abilities and our awareness of the truth of the greater reality, because it's comfortable, because it's actually like a rest. You could even say we're on vacation here from the greater truth of omnipotence, because what happens is, once you become aware of the truth of things, it is maddening. The fucking fact that you really, you can't really die is maddening. The fact that you can't even escape your own fucking mind is maddening. And it can push you to the edge of madness, to where you beg for oblivion. The idea of oblivion is like an intoxicant in and of itself, because the madness of existence gets crazy. And I've seen those places on deep fucking trips, and I've been there many times, man. And it is fucking scary, and it's hard. It's fucking. As a matter of fact, one of my favorite terms I've coined from that aspect of my life is you have no idea what madness is until you find yourself in a place where even beauty makes no sense. And I've been there, man. It's fucking insane. I mean, that's why I haven't taken mushrooms in over a year and a half, because the last trip I took was a 5-gram mushroom trip, and it was so fucking intense that when I came back to this reality, man, I didn't even believe in this world. I didn't believe in this matrix anymore, because I knew it was fucking fake, so to speak. You know what I mean? I knew this was only a facade, that, this reality is just something to sort of pacify you from the greater truth in a lot of respects. Yeah, we come here to learn and all that, but it's not. It's a lot more than what we think it is. There's definitely a veil. There is a veil of human, there's like a veil of humans' ability to understand things that goes on, but that veil is put there for our benefit here. You know what I mean? Just because, I mean, once you realize that you are everything and everybody else, it not only is it like one of the most lonely experiences possible, to realize that everything is you in different fractal forms, but you realize how alone you really are, and it's like, man, it's fucking scary. It's hard, but but that's where beauty comes in, because the principle of beauty is something that you can always ground yourself again. You can always sort of break out of that loop of madness, because it can get maddening. Fucking, I mean, really, the idea of existence turns into insanity. The idea of beauty and pleasure becomes as insane as torture. So the idea of beauty the idea of beauty and perfection and pleasure turns into torture, as if you were being whipped and have a car battery put on your balls, or fucking burned, whatever, whipped, whatever. It becomes as torturous as that. It's we sort of like, we sort of forget for a reason here, and it's for our benefit usually.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff we can cover in a day with entanglements of this planet and what we're going through on a daily basis of layered over bales, all kinds of matrices and things to like keep it maintained in this process. And like once we leave it in a journeying process such as mushrooms or LSD or some type of psychedelic experience, then we grow in our ability to process infinitely, and it can be overwhelming. It can even be very traumatic, but it's also freeing to a point because it gives you another perspective to look at your already existing perspective and change who you are very quickly, and then grow at an exponential rate that changes your entire timeline. I had like multiple same positive experiences as well as really negative experiences in this aspect that still had large amounts of growth. I had this weird thing that happened where I was at a party in alcohol, and somebody passed me something I thought was cannabis, but it was like synthetic cannabis, and yeah, it was awful. I smoked it like it was regular, and then I end up finding myself in this. I apparently passed out and found myself in this mental prison that I was stuck in for, and was like, there was like a bunch of different things that happened and beings I met and tried to interview me. It wasn't a very positive experience, and I had versions of myself from the future eventually rescue me and then bring me back and then heal the shit out of me from that. I was in a mental prison for about like over 9,000 years in a mental state, and I felt it, and I was like stuck in stillness and meditating, and I learned a whole fuckload of shit. And then the transference process back to this wasn't easy, and I'm still breaking it down. So I grew a fuckload in that moment, and that was a little it was not little, it was very traumatic. But then there's the positive aspect of it where it changed my whole perspective of it. So,
Yeah, dude, it's a funny you mentioned that, because one of the worst, not one of the worst experience I had on so-called trips, in that experience was on a cookie. It was off of a cannabis cookie that I ate, and that was the worst psychedelic experience I've ever had. It was like, and I'm wondering if the person who made it used fucking fake cannabis, because it was awful, dude. It was bad. It was like hell. Infinite. It was like the same kind of thing you're talking about, where you're in a mental prison for eternity. So you can't even put a label of time on it because it's eternity, and you are acutely aware of the fact that it is eternity. So the idea of being back here with the clock ticking is so far from your reality in that moment, and it was hell. It was awful. It was so
all this, your mind.
Yeah, it was hell. It was terrible, dude. And I'm wondering if, but then again, I've heard a lot of stories that eating cannabis can be dangerous because of that. And that definitely is true. And it came in the form of a tiny cookie, man. I actually took a small cookie, cut it in half, and only ate half of the cookie. And it was, before I knew it, I was in this realm of hell. It was awful. Cannabis is nasty when it's like a woman. I mean, cannabis is a very feminine entity behind that, and it's like, and it has all the wrath of a woman when she's pissed off. You know what I mean? So if you go into a cannabis experience and you in that greater force behind the cannabis, that core aspect is pissed off for some reason, you're going to be in for a world of shit. I mean, and it's not pleasant. It is
There's a
awful.
spirit like
But
behind it, even past like whatever death process, because like trees and plants don't have a same death process. They keep in existence and spiritual to like being protecting of a wooden desk or whatever, or a ship on the
yeah,
water, and they can become very haunted. They can be very hurt, have a lot of anger, trapped emotions, and when you're interacting and intaking that haunted spirit, then that will affect you greatly, especially when it changes your perception. GMO cannabis is like got so much horribleness to it, as well as the synthetic stuff. Uh, my God, it has portals connected to the nether realm. It's got like all these different shit that like just flows in, and like when you're taking drugs, you're opening up portals energetically in consciousness, and that can allow things in. And so if like you're planning on doing any type of drugs, I recommend clearing the shit out of it, putting it in like a sacred place so that it can de-haunt itself, and at least then it doesn't hate you and it doesn't have as much backdoors into like making it a bad trip. Um,
yeah, no, yeah, no, right. And since then, I've learned. I mean, there is a sweet spot with the mushrooms. I mean, if you can dial it in and hit that sweet spot, you're definitely in good shape. But there's people out there who advocate taking high doses, and I call anything above 5 grams a high dose. Um, that's just too much for your mind to be able to handle, truthfully, because it's just way too much. You go to a place that you can't even fucking comprehend what's going on. So my advice is to anyone who wants to get into taking mushrooms or anything like that, just find your sweet spot. Because once you do, it is a divine experience. It's so perfect that you can't even believe it. And for me, that area seems to be like around the 3.5 gram range. That's where you're really fully immersed in the experience. You're fully on the other side, if you want to say that, but you're not so far that you just can't make sense of anything. So you get the full divine experience. So it's like a tuning. So it basically, I suspect that it's most definitely a symbiotic relationship with whatever the mushroom is. So meaning that there's not necessarily one mushroom entity, but there could be several, and they could be just a separate life form with individual personalities, just like you and I. You know what I mean? But on a different mushroom level. 'Cause I have no doubt that the mushroom was put here for human beings to wake up with. Because if you want to wake up from the matrix, take a good healthy dose of mushrooms, and you almost guaranteed will. I mean, unless you're so stuck that you can't even get through that. But if you do it right, you should be fine. Yeah, I mean, but if you want to start the process, but then again, see, I didn't start taking mushrooms or anything like that until I was like over 40 already. And at that point, I had already been had a practice of a, a daily practice of silent meditation that I do every day. And I've been doing that for fucking years and years and years. So I'm more prime, I guess you could say, to be able to go deeper into those realms than maybe most other people would be. So it's hard to compare the experience between two people because everyone's so different. It's sort of like on Star Wars, when Yoda says to Luke, you know, when he's supposed to go into the swamp, and Luke, and he says something like, "Yeah, you don't need those weapons and shit." And Luke's, "Why, is there anything in there?" And Yoda's like, only what you take with you. That's sort of a bad paraphrase of the scene,
that's
but
absolutely,
you know what I mean?
yeah, perfect for that,
Yeah.
because it's like when you're interacting with the collective consciousness of the spirits of the psilocybin or mushroom, whatever, and you're dealing with what it's dealing with, what it can hold up, what it knows about in its mystery school, and what it wants to share with you. If you're
Yeah.
connecting to a greater collective of like, hey, maybe your spirit tree of existence has all versions of itself that decided to become mushrooms, and even that type of species, and you can connect with that, and they don't really inherently want to harm you, and they probably even want you to have a greater experience so you can interact with them, and you can even heal the mushroom uh, spirit while it's inside you, especially if you take like a haunted mushroom. I've had like experience with shamanism where it taps you into a greater awareness, empathy, where you can feel more around you. You can test things, operating systems, abilities, energy flow. You can feel at a greater length. You can feel things around you. You can see all that. It's using it kind of like a tool of a ladder to greater awareness of consciousness, so you can get the apple and then bring back down. It changes your entire reality and how you view things. So it can be a great operating system. Everyone gets shown kind of like well, it's either the mushrooms like, yeah, I don't want you to hate me, so let's automatically put you in a perspective where you're feeling amazing, you feel good, you want to seek more interaction with the mushroom kingdom. And then like when you start getting more experience with it, then the mushroom will start showing you things that are the biggest blockages in what you could achieve in consciousness that would propel you way further, which is involved in facing our shadow self, which is going into the cave in Star Wars and facing himself as like Darth Vader, and it shows and you can feel it, and that's the bad trip people are feeling. It doesn't have to be a permanent bad trip. Essentially, you got to heal yourself, your shadow self, and by interaction you're also healing the mushroom itself, so that it's kind of like you're transmuting all that darkness into light, and after that you feel amazing. And I got good at that and be able to help people through bad trips and then turn it into good trips. And you can use all kinds of things, tools and ways to cope with that and bring you into that state, because sometimes I've even been in a point where things have tried to possess me at those times, and it's very dramatic. It's very traumatic because they open up your empathic organ so you can feel everything deeply. And then it took me to where I could test actual things of what worked, to be able to learn how to punch psionically from a distance, protect my sovereignty, my reality. But if something's taking away your free will, you have the right to hold your ground and kick its ass out of you. And then you feel that deeply, and you feel when it works, and then it grows your perspective on belief and what you can do, like quite dramatically. And yeah, it's
basically, yeah.
growth. But if you let
it's a powerful tool. I mean, it definitely is. It's not a party drug at all. I mean, you shouldn't be taking mushrooms with the idea to go out and have a good time. I mean, you should be taking mushrooms to really begin to see who and what you really are. It's basically the only reason you should be taking them. If you want to go party, go party. But if you want to learn something about yourself and the nature of reality, stay home and take mushrooms with either by yourself or with someone who's you're really close with. But the thing I've noticed is in all of the trips that I've had, all of the significant trips, you're alone. You're alone because you're ultimately alone. I mean, I've had people just, even my dog, when I was here with him tripping one time, he just wandered off and just was somewhere else. And it's sort of like you realize that that's the way it is. It is because you are basically, there's a sense of oneness with the idea that you are everything else, but there's a lonely aspect to it too that is definitely tangible and real. And there's also a silence that usually shows up at some point in the mushroom too, that is just the silence of zero, basically, I guess you could say that. And it's like really, really haunting. It's a silence of death, basically, the silence of oblivion. And it's like when you feel that sensation, it's weird to grasp that, because it's like, man, there's something over there, and it's just, and it's but it's powerful. But because there's a lot of talk. I mean, it's become popular lately for people to sort of talk down about the experience with sacred plants like that. Man, most people in this world need a kickstart.